All right, I want to bring in Yaakov Katz from Jerusalem. He's a senior columnist at the Jerusalem Post and a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Thanks so much for being on with us again. So I want to go back to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comments. I mean, what do you make of them and what that might mean, given that Hamas has promised there can be no peace without a path to statehood? Are we just sort of back to the beginning here?
Well, I think Israel is still searching for that victory, right? Hamas has to be removed from power in Gaza for there to be security and safety for Israel along its borders. And I would even say, Kim, for the Palestinians to have a future of their own independent statehood, as long as there is a terrorist entity that is willing to massacre children, men, and women the way they did on October 7th and continue to hold on to Israeli hostages. And I was listening to the news before in that segment about the cemeteries. I don't understand what the world expects of Israel, right? They are holding on to 136 of our people. Of course, we're going to search for them potentially in cemeteries. This is part of the hunt for the citizens who were taken from their beds on that day of October 7th and brought to tunnels and to dark places in Gaza. What Netanyahu is saying is that Hamas has to be removed from power for there to be security and safety. But I agree with you, is that Israel does need to articulate some sort of day after plan, a political resolution, and that Israel has yet to do. And that is what I think is causing some of that tension right now between the international community and the state of Israel.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about that plan, but first talking about the international community here. As we heard, Netanyahu's comments are in stark contrast to the Biden administration's position. What ramifications could this have? After all, Israel needs U.S. aid and weapons, and Israel's already losing support among left-leaning Democrats, and the GOP is becoming more and more isolationist.
This is a big balancing act, or very delicate, that Netanyahu needs to somehow walk together with his government. Let's remember that on the right of Netanyahu, he has coalition partners who do not want to hear even the slightest talk of the prospect of an independent Palestinian state or the two-state solution, which is what the Biden administration, the president continues to talk about that. Secretary Blinken, who was here just a few days ago, continues to talk about that. So that is definitely the diplomatic horizon that the Americans want. But politically in Israel, it's not digestible at the moment. And that's why I think we're hearing Netanyahu say, I'm not going to give up Hamastan in Gaza to create a Fatahstan, a reference to the Palestinian Authority. And that is acceptable politically in Israel right now because, yes, Israelis after October 7th have moved to the right. But we do have to keep in mind is that Israel does need American support. We need American support for spare parts for our aircraft, for munitions, for the continued delivery of those supplies, for the diplomatic cover that the U.S. provides Israel at the United Nations and other places. Israel does not want to be isolated around the world. Israel does not want to be seen as a country that is overly dependent on one of its partners like the United States, that wants it to remain a two-way street in that diplomatic and military alliance that it has. And therefore, Netanyahu is having a difficult time juggling his political troubles together with the need to preserve that intense and very important relationship with the United States.
All right. So on the plan, I want to touch on a provocative interview that aired with a member of Israel's war cabinet, Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, who's been involved, as you know, in the decision making in this war. And one of the things that he said was that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's responsibility for the October 7th attack is, quote, sharp and clear. But also he said that there has to be a vision for how to wind down the war, like you just said. And so far, there doesn't seem to be that kind of plan. Why is that, do you think?
Well, you know, Kim, that it was the famous military theorist Clausewitz who said that military action is only a means for a political resolution. I think everyone gets that, but Netanyahu is refusing to articulate that plan because, as I mentioned before, his political challenges domestically. Gadi Eisenkot, by the way, a former chief of staff of the IDF who lost a son, Mayor Eisenkot, inside the fighting in Gaza as a soldier during this war, he did say that Netanyahu was responsible. And the reason he pointed that out is because the prime minister has until now refused to take responsibility. He's refused to say that maybe I made mistakes, maybe I had a hand in the blindness, the strategic blindness that Israel suffered from on the eve of October 7th that allowed Hamas to penetrate our border, to go into our communities, to massacre over 1,200 people on that horrific day, And Netanyahu refuses to accept that responsibility, even though he is the prime minister, the head of this government. But I think that we have to come up with what we want to see happen afterwards in Gaza. And the problem is, Kim, there aren't a lot of potential candidates to take over the Gaza Strip, right? I don't see people lining up and saying, hey, we want to be the ones to come in. So it's either going to be Israel, or we're going to have to find a way to work with the Palestinian Authority. And that is something that we have to prepare the ground for, to get them to reform, to be less corrupt, less supportive of terror, for that to even be possible.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. But again, appreciate your analysis. Yaakov Katz, thanks so much.